So I wanted to make this follow-up video just for things to do to help make your shift a little bit easier. So the number one thing that I would say, you know, in general for anyone during shift is to make sure you hydrate yourself. 12-hour shifts can be very long. A lot of times it actually goes over the 12 hours. You're on your feet quite a bit. You are moving patients around. You're running around to diagnostic testing or doing whatever. That it's really important that you make sure you hydrate yourself. And this is especially true when you're pregnant. Now, in the first trimester of my pregnancy, I had hyperemesis, so I had a very hard time keeping food and liquids down. I would vomit at least 10 times a day, and I tried multiple different medications until they finally gave me Phenergan suppository, which I had to take every 6 hours, and it was like literally on the dot 6 hours I had to take that medication. So for me, drinking water was very, very hard because I also noticed that when I would drink water, it would actually taste really funny to me, like almost like a metallic taste, which I couldn't really figure out. So I would try different brands of waters. I tried putting the water, like drinking it out in a regular plastic water bottle, tried drinking it in cups, but nothing was really helping. So what I finally started to do was use the flavored waters. But then my concern was that am I getting too much sugar by drinking all this? So towards the end of the hyperemesis, when things started to finally level out, I was able to start drinking water again. So I shoot for drinking at least 2 large 33-ounce bottles of water while I'm at my shift. Do I always hit that? No, but I try to make sure that I hit it at least by the end of the night. Actually, no, the 233 is just during my shift. I will try to drink additional water after that because I think you should average somewhere around 80 ounces of water generally, so you should try to get in more water. And it does make it difficult because you already have to pee because of the weight of the baby, and then, you know, being busy, or you're caring for patients who are in isolation and you have to give meds, or you have another patient that it makes it hard for you to go to the bathroom, but you have to prioritize hydrating yourself and going to the bathroom regularly, because you don't want to cause any issues. Because during my hyperemesis, naturally, because I wasn't eating and drinking, I ended up being dehydrated. So they found ketones in my urine, and then I actually had to go to the ER for fluids and then IV Zofran to kind of calm everything down and get fluids in me. During that time, I probably lost maybe about 7 or 8 pounds, which it wasn't like a huge thing because I am actually on the higher end of my BMI scale, so it wasn't like a drastic thing, but at the same time you have to be very cognizant of the weight that you're losing. And I will also say that you really want to be an advocate for yourself, that when they're trying certain medications and you know it's just not working, don't try to just suck it up and like work through it. Like when they first started giving me medications, I was trying Unisom and B6, which I tried for probably like a week and a half, and that did nothing for me. Then I tried Zofran, and I had increased vomiting with Zofran, and I was only on Zofran for maybe 4 or 5 days, and I told them, I was like, this isn't working. They're like, well, give it a little bit more time. But I was like, I can't function this way. I can't be an effective and safe nurse if I have to constantly run to the bathroom to throw up. So then they tried me on Reglan, and Reglan did nothing for me either. And I was probably on Reglan for a week because I was really trying to see if it would start to level out. It was better than how I was on Zofran, but I was still vomiting multiple times. And then eventually we went to the Phenergan, and that was pretty much, I don't want to say an immediate relief, but I would wake up in the morning, get ready for work, I would take the medication, which was actually a little difficult because 1, it's a suppository, and 2, it has to be refrigerated, so I couldn't really just carry the medicine with me in the pocket because then it melts. It was just a whole thing. But so I would take the medicine, and then probably about 15-20 minutes later, then I would eat, and I was able to hold everything down. But literally at the 6-minute mark, I mean the 6-hour mark, I had to take my next dose, or I was starting to feel the nausea start up again, and if I waited too long, I would start throwing up immediately. And whenever I would throw up, it was more like an intractable, just constant, couldn't stop, just dry heaving, whole body, sometimes peeing on myself because it was like that much force, vomiting. So you have to find what works for you, but make sure you advocate if something is not working, that you stick to your guns and you say you need to try something else, because it is not meant for anyone to suffer through. Like pregnancy, I mean, everyone generally just thinks that it's all beautiful and stuff like that, but this is hard, and it doesn't need to be even harder than it already is. So definitely talk to your doctors, talk to whoever it is that will listen to you, and make sure you get the proper medication or whatever it is to help you get through it. Another thing that's really important is eating snacks regularly. For me, I noticed with the hyperemesis, whenever I got hungry, that increased the nausea even more. So if I would wake up in the morning and I would take an hour to get up and eat, then I would definitely start vomiting for the rest of the day. Or if I was hungry in the middle of the day. And normally what it felt like to me was like I could start feeling like a little bit of nausea building on my stomach, just kind of felt uneasy, queasy, just like something was off. And then it would just start to build up, and then eventually it was full blown. So the minute I even start to remotely feel hungry, I make sure I eat. Which has not always been to my benefit, because if I'm out, I've had fast food and the baby or my body just does not agree with fast food. I had like a burger from a fast food place and I was sick an hour later. Pizza does not seem to agree with me well either. So I have to kind of be careful about what it is that I am eating, and make sure that I carry snacks if I'm going to do something, so that I don't have to run into situations where I have to eat fast food because I'm hungry. So snacks that I would recommend would definitely be yogurts. I feel like that was like something that was easy for me to take to work. Fruits I liked, but I felt like sometimes it wouldn't last as long. They say nuts are really good, so you know, choose one that is good for you. I tried doing protein shakes in the morning sometimes because I was trying to make sure that I was getting at least some type of calories in, but it was kind of hit or miss. Sometimes I liked it, sometimes I couldn't, because it had to be cold. Anything that was like warm temp was like, just threw me off too. So figure out what works for you in that. And then thankfully, you know, being a nurse, you kind of have, well, at least at my hospital, there's always some type of snack or something laying around that I was able to eat. Cheese and crackers were probably like one of my favorite things. Yeah, stuff like that. So I would figure out what kind of snacks that you like, and then, you know, bring it with you to work. Always pack like a snack bag or something. So once I finally got my appetite back, I was like insatiable. I was going into my second trimester and I just wanted to eat everything. So I would wake up at 5:20 in the morning, shower, get dressed, and then I would eat like a breakfast sandwich, like one of the Jimmy Dean sandwich. Then I would get to work, and then maybe an hour after I've gotten report and I've done an assessment and charted, so maybe like somewhere around 9, I would have a second breakfast. So I would normally go get an omelet and like some type of protein. I would try not to do carbs because I did the carbs earlier in the day, like my first breakfast. Then probably around 11 or 12, I was looking for some other type of snack. So this would normally be like crackers, cheese, yogurt, fruits, or something like that. And then at the end of the day, probably around 4 or maybe 5, I would have my last meal for the day. Because for whatever reason, if I was to eat by the time I got home, which is normally like around 7:38, that would make me sick to my stomach. Like I couldn't handle anything heavy in my stomach. I needed that time to digest. So I would normally eat my last meal while I was at work at 5 p.m. and I wouldn't be hungry for the rest of the night. Because as soon as I would get home, like 7:38, I was soon going to bed within an hour. So I wouldn't eat when I get home. And that still kind of stands to be true for me. I don't do well with eating late and then trying to lay down, because now I have acid reflux. So now if I eat and it's closer to the time I'm going to sleep, I have to sleep sitting up, or else I am miserable. I burp the entire time. I burp in general now a lot, but I burp even more. But now you can feel the acid building up. I have to take Tums. I can feel nauseous. So I tried to eat earlier in the day just because heavier meals seems to annoy me. I think another important thing to do is that, and this is something my boyfriend told me, is that when I eat something that I notice that is not sitting with me well, write it down so that I remember this later when I go and try to eat it again, because I'll end up eating it and then I'll have the same reaction. It's kind of like, why are you doing this to yourself? And 1, I would either forget, or 2, I would think like, well, maybe it'll get better, but it didn't. So I have a list of things that I just can't eat. Like certain cereals seem to like really cause issues. Like I said, pizza, fast food aren't my best friends right now. So just make a list of things that you can't eat and then things that you can, so that you can kind of help yourself go through it. Another thing that's important is making sure you take your time. I was constantly like trying to move how I was moving before, because I felt like I didn't want to be a burden, when I wanted to keep up with how I normally am. But when you're, especially in your first trimester, I was just tired all the time. I was constantly taking naps as soon as I was home. I was at work and I just felt fatigued, and you can't, well, I don't drink coffee in general, but you shouldn't really take in too much caffeine, so there wasn't really anything for me to do to kind of boost my energy throughout the day. You kind of have to make sure you take your time and you don't overdo it. During my first trimester, I wasn't overdoing it too much because I would kind of like sit back a little bit when I needed to, but I would say a couple weeks ago, I had 2 patients that were just, a lot was going on with them, and I was moving around a ton, and I was like trying to get them situated because one had to go to the OR, the other one wasn't doing great, and by the next day I was having intense abdominal pain, and I was having that pain for a few days. So then I went to the doctors and we thought maybe it was a UTI, and then I was still having pain, and then it was like so bad even during work that it was so uncomfortable that I was starting to get worried about the baby, because then I noticed that he wasn't moving as much, because I started feeling him move from around 17 weeks. So then I tried to do a Doppler on him and I couldn't hear his heartbeat, but it could have also just been nerves or the way he was centered or the Doppler itself. So then I ended up going to the ER during work because I was just worried about the abdominal pain, that nothing, like the antibiotics that they gave prophylactically wasn't working, the pain was increasing, I was having radiating pain to my back. They didn't think it was round ligament pain because it was more in a central area, as opposed to like up along the sides of my abdomen. So doing that, they checked me to see if I was in early labor. They which they found out I wasn't. They were able to get the baby's heartbeat, but it was just like a whole thing. So, and I honestly believe it's just because I just overdid it those 2 days, that my body was just like trying to catch up, and possibly maybe even tore a ligament or something. I stressed my body too much and I had to take it slower. Since then, I've been very cognizant of making sure I sit when I need to. I put my feet up, drink water. I don't overdo it, because the last thing you want to do is do anything that's going to harm yourself or your baby. So take your time. Another important thing is to wear comfortable shoes. I think in nursing you generally have to find out what works for you anyways, because everyone was like on the dance go things and I loved it, but then it was like tearing up my feet, and I was wearing my Nikes Air Maxes because I loved those for the longest, but then they started to feel a little too tight. So then probably about a year or 2 ago, I started wearing Adidas Ultra Boost, and I love them. They literally feel like clouds on your feet. I've probably become a bit obsessed with them because I probably have 8 or 9 pairs now, but they're literally the best sneakers ever. So if you're trying to find a pair, I would say definitely try a number of shoes. Try the Adidas Ultra Boost. They are expensive, but I feel that they're well worth it. I have a pair that I had that were old already, maybe a year or 2, that now I wear at work, and they still work well for me. And then lastly, scheduling shifts. For me, working 2 shifts, because I am part-time, because I was also teaching. I taught for my community college that I graduated nursing school from, and then I also teach for an Ivy League school that's not too far from here. But so I was working 2 days in the ICU, and then I was working 2 days at the community college teaching clinicals, and then I was working 1 12-hour shift for the Ivy League school at a hospital. So I was working 5 days a week. So, and this was during my first trimester. I did not know I was pregnant when I signed up for all these things, and I was so tired because I was doing a lot. But in general, I would say is try not to cluster all of your days together, because it makes it so much harder, especially as you get bigger. Now that I'm in my 2nd trimester, and because of everything that's going on, I'm only working 2 days in the ICU, and I'm now done teaching because my one set of students have graduated, my other sets of students are in summer break. But I don't want to pick up an additional shift. Just mainly because of what's going on right now. I'm trying to reduce the amount of risk I have by being in the ICU and having, you know, corona positive patients that are around. But when I am there, I try to space out my 2 days so that they're not back to back. Or if I'm scheduling myself, say if I work the weekend, a Saturday and Sunday, I wouldn't schedule myself for Monday, Tuesday. I would probably push it all the way to the end of the week of like Thursday, Friday. So I have at least 4 to 5 days in between to rest. but do what works best for you. If you need to schedule those 2 days and you feel like you can manage, by all means do it. But for me, I felt like I've had a little bit of a harder time during this pregnancy, between being sick, not being able to hydrate enough, the ligament pains, the acid reflux, just anything that normally comes with pregnancy symptoms, you name it, I've probably had it, because this has just been an enlightening experience for me. So make sure you schedule shifts that work for you, and if you need to pick up additional shifts, by all means, but make sure that you don't overwork yourself, because you'll end up regretting it later. And then lastly, the only thing else I wanted to talk about was getting comfortable scrubs. I actually bought maternity scrubs in my first trimester because I just noticed that even though I didn't so much have like necessarily like a belly, my waist started to get larger and my hips definitely got larger. And I had literally just bought a new set of scrubs to start my job, because I started my job in November and was pregnant in December. And by probably, I think by January or February, definitely by February, things were just too tight for me, that it wasn't comfortable, that I just felt too restricted. So I bought maternity scrubs, which I'm grateful for now, because as my stomach has grown, I've definitely been able to fill them in more and I don't feel restricted, and that's like one less thing you have to worry about. So definitely recommend that. Oh, and then get a belly band also once you start to actually have a stomach and you feel like the weight is kind of like pulling on you. I didn't wear a belly band those 2 days that I was feeling those intense abdominal pains. And since then, I've been cognizant of wearing a belly band while at work. And I've noticed that I definitely have far less pain. I will say that I notice more back pain. But it's not abdominal pain, and I feel like, at least for my peace of mind, I know back pain is probably just generally to me being on my feet, whereas abdominal pain, like, you worried, like, is there something going on with the baby? So those are the things that I recommend. I hope that things were helpful to you. I will definitely make more videos about how to work while pregnant in the hospital or in the ICU. If you have any additional tips, please put them in the comments. If you have any questions, definitely ask. And everyone take care. Thanks.